Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar event 25 cost saving hacks for your extended workforce. See, 25 cost saving hacks in that strategic world where it is really very important. My name is Bryan Peña, and I am so excited to be joining you today with my good friend, Sunil Bagai. We're going to be talking about my favorite topic, something near and dear to my heart, cost savings. Anyone who knows me knows my background is in procurement, strategic sourcing, and running programs. And I am obsessed with cost savings and everything that goes along with it within reason. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start with our usual sort of back and forth where we do some housekeeping, and let's get started without further ado. So hopefully those of you who are on the phone joins us for our speed networking session. It is always one of our most popular components of our events, along with our roundtable sessions afterwards. We certainly hope you joined us. For those of you who did, I had some great conversations, and I'm looking forward to all of you guys participating in today's event actively because it's such a hot topic. I'm going to go through some housekeeping, and I'm going to try and set the stage with a little bit of words of wisdom, hopefully my own sort of perspective on this. And then I'm going to bring on the main event, which is Sunil, CEO of Prosperix. And we're going to talk about specifically, we've assembled a list of 25 top notch hacks for that you can leverage today to start saving money and making a difference for your contingent workforce. I see somebody making the step of putting their LinkedIn profile in the side. Great idea. If you want to do it yourself and connect with others, please feel free to do that. After going through our session, we're going to have some Q&A. If you have any questions about the control panel, hopefully those of you, we've been doing this a long time, share your thoughts to all the attendees in the event. That chat button there, there's a little chat will show up as we'll chat with everybody. We certainly hope that Q&A, you will post your Q&A directly there. That'll be moderated by Kenna. She will be facilitating that, and we'll try to do our best to address those as soon as we can. We are obsessed about answering questions. We'll keep an eye out for alerts, and we can also make direct messages to other attendees if you should so choose. There's a couple things. One, again, we have the roundtable sessions. We hope you'll join us afterwards. We've had those sessions carry on for as long as an hour afterwards. So don't be shy. Hopefully you have time. If not, no big deal, but we certainly hope to see you and join us and carry on the discussion. Yes, slides will be available to all attendees after the survey. So what we're going to do is you're going to be given a email. All the attendees receive an email straight from the SurveyMonkey site. After completing that survey, you will be able to download that presentation as presented. Also, if you're interested in hosting your own defined event, please go ahead and scan that chart. As you can see, we've done a really good job and kind of cracked the code of what it takes to make a great event. These are our 6 most recent events. And as you can see, they continue to perform well with happy sponsors and happy attendees. So we certainly hope you'll take a moment to scan it and feel free to reach out to us and see if there's any way that we can help you elevate your game within the industry, either as a speaker or as a sponsor. Speaking of which, we have our next event after this is going to be debunking the myths of talent marketplaces, sponsored by Talmix. Now that is going to be Wednesday, September 27th. And actually the third in our series. This will be the third event where we continue with a narrative of how you can leverage talent marketplaces within your contingent workforce and what it needs to do to make them successful. If you want to join that, we certainly hope you'll see us there. Feel free to scan that, take a quick snapshot and register there. Otherwise you'll get it when you download the slides after. A couple of things to point out. Again, now that we're going to move on to setting the stage, and I forgot to reference that we will be making a special after the event. We're going to be a special ebook available with instructions on how you can access that there. So I'm going to just take a couple of minutes to talk about cost savings. A lot of times when it comes to cost savings, it's looked to as a zero sum game. And there's a book I'm reading at this time called Skin in the Game by Nassim Taleb. Fantastic book, all about unintended consequences and having people who are invested in the outcomes deal with the decisions that they make. And so often when it comes to cost savings, many program managers forget that they need to have skin in the game because oftentimes our decisions affect thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of people. And so while we focus on cost savings and optimizing the role, we need to recognize that we need to consider our supplier partners because they have skin in the game, as should you individually and collectively. And what that means is looking at creating a symmetrical sort of benefit so that everybody wins. In doing so, I've compiled a couple of key considerations that anyone needs to take into account whenever they enter a cost saving initiative. Just a couple of things to think about. Is the contract of strategic importance? Are the services to be provided critical to the business? You don't want to really mess around with those strategic relationships and really aggressively pursue cost savings for something that's going to result in things not getting out the door in time. Are there other resources available? What are the ramifications of an insolvency? I can tell you from personal experience, we have had a couple of situations where many of us have lived through where supplier insolvency was a very real thing. And I can name a couple of well known names who were forced to pay invoices twice because the provider went out of business. Does the contract cover a significant period of time? Are you going to negotiate a deal that has 6 months left in it? Is it a sole source, or for the services, are you able to find alternate sources? And is there room in my contract for more discounting? That is a key thing to consider. Understanding exactly what the margins are, what the profitability of your partners are, and how much realistically you can gain from a traditional cost savings mechanism is critical. And then if I am going to be asking for a discount, what's a reasonable sort of quid pro quo that I can offer to my supplier partner? How much revenue are they going to need for me to offset a discount? You can say simply, I can ask for a 10% discount, but if it's going to take them tripling their revenue to offset that in some low margin businesses, not really worth it. And that means, are those savings go real? And finally, are we worth the trouble? So often in the seat, we forget the fact that there's choice involved. And are we the best client? In my mind, I've always evangelized. You can look at anything I've ever written, every speech I've ever given, every presentation I've ever provided. And I can tell you, this is front and center. Are you worth the trouble? To be the best client or to get the best price, you need to be the best client. And so becoming really viciously efficient and understanding how your behavior affects your suppliers is critical to the long-term health of really any successful supplier relationship, much less a cost saving initiative. So what does that mean? Or do you have a high touch culture? How often are your requisitions real? That's a huge issue for many suppliers. How quickly do people get in the time capture? How long and how efficient is your onboarding? Do you have lengthy or inconsistent payment terms? Is your accounting structure overly complicated and difficult to manage? Is the spend opportunity, and this is the big one, is the spend opportunity realistic? I was talking to a supplier just yesterday, and they were lamenting the fact that they won a $25 million RFP, but lo and behold, it only became a $1 million implementation. At the same time, the client still expected the same level of service. I think we can all see the problem with that. Death by metrics, low dollar short term placements, and death by metrics I mentioned before. You have so many SLAs that it's almost impossible to comply with all. Do you move the goalposts? You increase or change your expectations? And then lack of self awareness, understanding the size of your deal relative to the services that you're expecting to offer. Are you expecting Rolls Royce services or Yugo rates? That's a great sort of aphorism. And understanding where you fit into that deal stream is important. And that may mean that you don't necessarily get to go with the biggest provider or the best known name. But if the service level really is there to be provided, you really want to make sure that you're focusing on the right partner for you. So, with that being said, one of the things that we're going to do in today is, of the 25 sort of hacks that we're going to go over, which is just a partial list, probably many more. I can put 15 more in my bag of tricks. And I'm sure Sunil has just as many, if not more, for himself. But the key element here is that we really are trying to do what and focus on a win win. All of the 25 hacks that we're looking at have some element of a mutual benefit. Okay. So it's not just about haggling. It's not just about asking for improvements in rates. It's about trying to find creative ways to resolve and find new solutions to generate mutual benefit and incremental cost savings. So that's it. That's the end of my soapbox. Without further ado, we want to welcome your questions. Keep those conversations going. And I want to go ahead and welcome my good friend, Sunil Bagai, to the stage. So let me just figure out how I can get this guy up and running. And Sunil, there we go. Come on up. Welcome, Sunil.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Sunil. So good to see you. And I'm so excited for today's topic. Is there anything in particular you want to talk about before we get started?
I think you really set the context well, speaking about the fact that it is not a zero sum game, right? At the end of the day, it is an ecosystem that we're part of where everybody needs to thrive together. Yes, businesses need cost savings. And yes, we need to also consider what the effect of that is going to have on suppliers and also candidates. These are the individuals that are the lifeblood of that business to make it successful. Perfect way to start the conversation. And today, hopefully, we'll cover a lot of meaningful ways to still get to the cost saving goals that every company has.
Absolutely. I am so excited. One thing that I think is a great sort of benefit for all the attendees for today, and even people who are going to be watching this on replay, is that this is all condensed into a book of wisdom. Why don't you talk about this real quickly and then we'll get started?
Yeah, with this webinar, we thought a lot about, hey, we have so much great content. How can we put this into a form factor that everybody can consume, not just on this webinar, which is live streamed, but also after the fact? And it can become a guidebook for how to help them achieve these cost saving strategic options. So that's what we've done. We've compiled a lot of information and also given indications about how much each one can provide in terms of cost savings in the ebook. And it's available for download after the webinar.
Fantastic. So I think this is so great. And I can't wait to see everybody download this damn thing. I think it's a fantastic book. It looks great. Content is good. And I don't think you're going to find this sort of content really anywhere. There's no other book that lists this like this, because one of the things that people always do is they gatekeep, right? They gatekeep these good ideas. And so this is just the beginning. So I'm really excited and certainly in line with the Prosperix brand of prosperity for all. But without further ado, let's get this ball rolling.
Perfect. The five pillars of strategic cost savings that we're going to cover today, Brian, are this are amplifying hiring options, which is the first, and we're going to help you see that. And we've broken this down into 5 sections because we figured there's ways to group these different cost savings. And we're also mixing up the hard cost savings with the soft cost savings. And so amplifying hiring options where we're going to start. Then we're going to go right to the hard cost savings, which are finding direct ways to save costs in your program. The third area we're going to look at is process and compliance. And many times these are overlooked areas. The fourth, hidden costs you haven't even considered or perhaps didn't even know that you had in your programs. And then finally, again, another hard cost saving area, which are discounts. And so we'll cover these section by section. And there's a lot of different good specific ways that you can implement these different cost savings.
Yeah, I think we just know we have posted a poll on the right-hand side. We will share those results if we get sufficient responses. I know we have a lot of people on the call. Sometimes they don't necessarily like to respond to polls. So I encourage you to fill it out. Let's get right to brass tacks. So amplify hiring options.
Yep. That's where we're going to get started today. Amplify hiring options. Let's go to the first one, Brian. All right. The first way that we're suggesting that people can save costs is number one, straightforward. If you have a contingent workforce program, increase the talent pools that you get access to. By simply accessing more talent, you will find more talent that's available at the costs that you're expecting. So publish a bill rate and you're looking for talent in just a specific geography. If you open it up to access more talent pools across different segments of talent. So whether it's different places on the web, like LinkedIn and different job boards and career sites and college places. So basically you can access more talent. By doing that simple act, you'll find that you'll be able to have more options to select for them. And some of those options are going to provide you cost savings immediately.
So when we think about this increasing talent pools, are you talking about increasing, like changing the type of sources you're looking at, like maybe including remote work or looking at other cities, or give me some example of specifically what you're thinking so that
Right now,
maybe
we're going to cover a number of those specifically in other ones, but this is just saying, look, if you have a overall talent pool that you're accessing, even with your suppliers of, let's say, 20,000 individuals, if you can increase it to 100,000, 500,000, now all of a sudden you're going to have more talent that's available at the price points that you're looking for. That immediately will allow you to have cost savings over a period of time.
Got it. Awesome. Love it.
Okay. Second one, increase suppliers to your program. And why we bring, focus on this particular point is majority of programs are always focused on less suppliers, optimizing suppliers, right? And what that does is automatically locks you into not enough competition, right? And so when you have less suppliers and certain rates that are fixed in, you're not going to necessarily always have the talent that is going to be at the most effective cost. So, but just going from a mindset of less is more to more is more, right? Allows you to implement basically a cost saving strategy over periods. So these are, again, first section is all about amplifying the hiring option. So the first is talent pool. Second is increasing some number of suppliers, getting into the mindset of more is more so that you have more options from a talent perspective from the suppliers that are servicing.
This is one that I really like because it flies in the face of traditional supplier rationalization theory, right? Anybody who's been in procurement knows the A.T. Kearney 7-step process. They understand that sourcing and about leveraging spend and consolidating suppliers. But increasing suppliers, specifically all forms of crowdsourcing, almost always universally yield better results than fewer people. And taking that logic to increasing suppliers and increasing competition, leveraging technology, and that's a critical element because so many of the things are so difficult to manage across large organizations. But being able to leverage that appropriately and leverage the right sort of crowd solves so many problems, not just cost savings, but general overall ease and stops the cold call and just a whole bunch of significant benefits of this approach, which I really like.
And if you think about it, why don't people do it? It's because of the things you just mentioned. It's complex to manage more suppliers. It's mostly more costly, usually a lot of administration, a lot of contract management, legal management, performance management. And so people just shy away from it. They'd rather manage less. And yet what they're doing is saying, hey, I'm trying to think of my own convenience rather than the cost savings. And so if there was a way to effectively manage, then you would want the extra access.
And this is also, I move on. I know we got so many. I want to touch one final point on this because it's one of my favorite points is that in this particular element, you have to have the right sort of suppliers in the program as well. Because there are many suppliers who are highly dependent upon relational selling, relational recruiting, and they don't want to necessarily compete on some of the elements that a large supply base competes on. So the right supply base is critical because there are thousands of suppliers who are more than happy to compete on the metrics that usually go along with a highly competitive program.
And so this one is about how do we do that using technology, right? And so the first two are about accessing talent pools, accessing more suppliers, and yet they don't give you a technological approach to being able to do that in a meaningful way, which doesn't increase administrative overhead or complexity and cost. And so if you leverage a hiring marketplace, in addition to your existing suppliers, you have access to not just more suppliers, but also more talent pools, which drives down your costs. So a hiring marketplace is an amazing way to get access to more talent using technology as a means to get there. So think about it this way. It's the same as Uber giving you the means to access drivers, thousands of drivers, but the right driver for your specific ride. That's what marketplaces do. They use technology behind the scenes, automation, AI to do a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the management, contract management, administrative management, but you can get access to more talent pools that are higher, at less cost, right? Higher efficiency.
So I have a real quick question. I have a question from the audience. I know we like questions. So I'm going to just go and show on the stage and there we go. This is from Dupree Jones. Isn't that a risk when adding suppliers if you're not able to give them realistic revenue projections / total contract value? What do you think, Sunil?
Yes, there's a good question there for sure. People are always weighing, hey, how do I give my suppliers enough access to revenue opportunity within this program so I get the right attention that I need? And yet, what we're saying is that mentality is automatically limiting, right? And when you open it up, what you're doing is allowing the best suppliers to be able to actually focus on supporting your programming. You may be surprised that the ones that you thought were the right suppliers that you were limiting basically access to and say, hey, these top 5 suppliers should get all my revenue spent may not be the best suppliers. By the way, have you ever had a supplier that they had 3 great recruiters and those 3 great recruiters now leave and are in a different organization? They go through their own attrition cycles. And so what is best is who can supply the right talent for this particular job right now? And it's not predictable. If you say, hey, I'm going to look at a quarterly scorecard 3 months later, 6 months later, you don't really know if the same supplier is the best 2 quarters later. You need real-time data to help figure that out. And that's where I'm saying a more is more approach, a network-based approach actually helps you solve that. And while it gives the revenue opportunity to more suppliers, democratized in a democratized way.
I think it's a truly transformative way to approach it. And we'll certainly carry on with this great conversation afterwards in a roundtable session. Hope you'll join us. Final one question, then we got to move on because we're running out of time already. What's the difference between a VMS and a hiring marketplace? Why don't you answer that while I switch to the next slide?
Yes. So VMS is really the underlying technology you use to manage a contingent workforce program, right? And that has been in existence for 2 decades. There's been a number of great technologies that have been there. And yet VMSs are evolving at lightning speed. And so some of the modern VMS technologies, like the one Prosperix offers, also do things like job distribution, automated supplier management, real-time reporting, and allow you to get the spend visibility, the performance management, everything you need to just manage that contingent workforce. That is necessary, as you could say, the foundation for managing a program. Hiring Marketplace is a fulfillment engine. And so that helps you actually fulfill the open jobs you may have in addition to your existing or incumbent suppliers. That 1-2 combination is rare. It doesn't really exist other than with Prosperix currently in the market, but it's what gives you the Ferrari engine for your VMS.
Got it. Thank you. And again, we'll continue the conversation afterwards. So let's keep on rolling. Hire remote or offshore candidates.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites, right? So think about is what gives you the greatest cost savings in a contingent workforce program? And I'll tell you, if the organization has the ability to hire remote or offshore candidates, you're going to see so much cost saving. So if you have a job that's based in New York, that's $150 an hour or $100 an hour, that same job, if it was basically similar skills, right, can be done remotely. It could be in Iowa and you'd have a $20, $30, $40 an hour cost savings. That's significant. If that same job can be done in Venezuela, we're now talking $50, $60 an hour cost saving. This is something that if you just implement this one hack, could save you 50% on your contingent workforce. But you got to do it strategically, right? You have to be a remote first organization. You have to know how to manage these remote workers in a meaningful way, the cultural aspect, the time zone aspect. There's many considerations, but if you solve for that, this can be a very meaningful way to save costs.
This is always a huge one. I know I have a couple of virtual admins I work with in Colombia, and I've been nothing but happy with the work that they've gotten so far. And even a business as small as ours can leverage these people and punch above our weight. So I deeply agree with this.
Another one that we've been thinking about, talking about, the whole industry is communicating about, and it's probably been the biggest buzzword over the last 2 years, is direct sourcing. Right? And I love the idea of direct sourcing. The theory, the concept is amazing. The practice, unfortunately, oftentimes falls short. What it really means is that you're basically building an internal capability to recruit your own talent and not relying on talent suppliers, right? There's costs in doing that. There's investment in building your own recruiting team, in having your own recruiting tools to be able to direct source. Many times companies are then outsourcing that to a third party to manage the direct sourcing process, to have the direct sourcing technology, to have access to the job boards and LinkedIn. And they find that the actual savings, like there is still some savings, it's not as great as what they had anticipated. And there's two other things that, you've got to consider. Direct sourcing works really well when you have repeatable positions. So for example, I'm hiring the same skill set over and over again, and therefore I can build and predict that I need this kind of a talent pipeline over again for a period of time. And then second is if you have high frequency roles, right? So you're going to need these skills over and over again, not just one time volume hiring, but ongoing. And so in those environments, direct sourcing can be very impactful. It can save your program from 6% all the way to 12% on average. You will need some sort of a direct sourcing partner unless you're doing everything in-house to help kind of get there, including the technology itself.
I think unless you've been hiding under a rock, everyone's pretty familiar with direct sourcing, but it's interesting because it's harder to implement than you think, but it's not as difficult as you imagine. I think that the way I think about it, it's not as difficult as you imagine, but it's harder than you think. Anyway, that's a little observation. I think there are a lot of people who are dipping their toe in this and finding it's a little bit more challenging to get to some of those dollars and cents, but it's a trend that is not going to go away. And I think it's certainly one to consider. Hard cost savings, my favorite.
Yeah.
So just real quick for people who are on the phone, hard cost savings is defined as things that literally yield a tangible and real budgetary benefit, as opposed to soft cost savings, which are things that are more process efficiency, risk reduction, and the like. If you're interested in learning more about hard versus soft savings, we do a whole training on it, and we can certainly talk about at the roundtables afterward. Hard cost savings. Let's move on.
Yep. So this is a really good one, Brian. Back to you and I were brainstorming. This is something you thought of, like, hey, you can just directly ask suppliers to lower their rates. right?
Yes.
And what's beautiful about that is instead of forcing something on suppliers, having a conversation means that you can actually ask them, hey, lay it out. Say, this is what we're trying to accomplish. These are our goals. Here's why, what the drivers are for why we need cost savings. And can you help us? Asking for help. Sometimes suppliers are willing to raise their hand and say, hey, yeah, we can help you. Here's how. And it becomes collaborative and in a way to achieve your cost saving goals in a meaningful way together.
This is one of my favorite things to do is to dig a little deep into working collaboratively to identify things that usually you might not have thought of. And oftentimes you can come and ask for their support and say, hey, we're at a challenging time. What can we do to lower our costs? And oftentimes you'll get some good ideas across 7, 10, 15 suppliers. You'll get a compilation of ideas to implement, and hopefully everybody benefits. I think that you'd be surprised what you can get by just asking. That's the secret that I look forward to my kids learning at some point.
Yeah. And through that dialogue, Ryan, what's also interesting is sometimes you figure out that it's never just a take, it's sometimes a give and get, right? Suppliers
100%.
say, hey, we can help you with this. Perhaps you can help us with this. And that conversation is very revealing. And you can find a lot of nuggets through that process and figure out how to make it a win-win.
Rate cards.
This is the one that the industry always gravitates towards, right?
Yeah.
How do we set rate cards for our program? And it's the one that everyone talks about in their RFPs, whether it's MSP RFPs, whether it's VMS RFPs, they want to have a solution for rate cards, understanding what the market's doing. They want to make sure the rates are in alignment with the market and they're not off base. They're not paying too much. They're not paying too little. And why is that important? Because if you're paying too much, you're basically giving money away to suppliers and candidates that you shouldn't be. If you're paying too little, you're not attracting enough talent. You're not attracting the suppliers to want to support your program. So it is essential and you have to go through this exercise. It's not easy to do as well. And there are some companies that are basically giving you access to more data. You need data, right? You need information to be able to understand what the market is using from a rate perspective. But once you have the data, and there's many sources, by the way. SIA has data. There's Brightfield that has data. Then you have data from companies like Magnet. There's a number of third parties, governments. So you can leverage career builders, demand tools as well. There's data that exists. The challenge is getting it to kind of be synchronized, harmonized, so you can use it effectively for contract positions rather than full-time positions. And once you have that, you can establish rate cards for average, junior level roles, senior level roles, then have some sort of a band as well.
So real quickly on this last point, the thing that I always like to do is to do analysis of your existing history. Benchmarking is great, and it certainly gives you a great sort of perspective, but understanding how to look at your own usage and history and determine, well, like I always say, how much margin lives in your deal is really going to be critical. We have one question that I'm going to show while I take to the next slide, and that's from Nancy Budmeyer. So real quickly, do you see that, Sunil? Do you find that in the LI space that a market program provides more cost savings than a rate card program? I
Yeah.
thought this was an interesting one because it's a really interesting discussion point. You can answer that while I move on to the next slide.
And I want to say, let's save that because we have that coming up in a few minutes as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we'll save that.
All right, there we go.
Publish
Maximum and minimum.
minimum maximum rate ranges for positions, right? So why that's important is because oftentimes companies say, well, here's the rate that we're going, right? And sometimes what happens is suppliers may have candidates that are actually available at a lower rate, but they're not going to submit them at the lower rate. They're going to submit at the bill rate that you requested, right? If you give them a range, then is on the supplier to figure out, hey, what's the right skill set of this particular individual? Are they intermediate skilled? Do they have all the skills? Are they senior level? Where are they coming in that band? And that may provide some cost savings for the program as well.
Excellent.
All right. So
There
you
we
just
go.
add bill rate versus markups. And you know what? In some cases, it becomes kind of a religious conversation. And some really feel that it's important to have just bill rate. In fact, they don't want to know about the pay raise the candidates are getting. And there's legacy reasons for that, right? There's reasons, they're afraid of audits. They're afraid of having that data and being seen that these are actually not contingent workers, but perhaps full-time employees, and having the responsibility from an IRS and fiduciary, statutory responsibility that comes with having an employee rather than contingent worker. So I think that fear causes them to feel that a bill rate program is the only way to go.
Yeah.
And why do they basically want a bill rate program? They don't want to have anything to know about how suppliers are managing their margins and they're living in their free. Well, if we give them a bill rate, as long as they manage and find the candidates within that bill rate, the rest is up to them. However, and I'm just pointing this out because we've been parts of different programs. Some clients love a market program. Some clients love a bill rate program. We don't care what they prefer, but there are pros and cons. Having a fixed markup program means that you're basically fixing the markup for all suppliers that it's equal. And it can be different per job category. So IT markups can be X, whereas light industrial can be Y, customer support can be something else, right? So what that does, it gives you visibility on what is the true markup for every supplier, right? And so what you also can do then is, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but you can do audits at a later date and figure out what are the pay rates and then compare the markups for suppliers across the board. So the reason for a fixed markup model is visibility and transparency. And many companies have figured out a way to do this without having the legal risk, right? And so what I'm saying is you should look at it. If you're not, it's something to consider.
Absolutely. I think understanding that there's flux in direction is really important. Sometimes you'll have bill rate for one category, markup and pay rate for others.
Yep.
It doesn't need to be one size fits all. And understanding
And
that
if you want
is strategic.
to touch on Nancy's question, which is really about in light industrial programs. When you have markup rates, right, you have to consider that, for example, for light industrial, heavy industrial, some manufacturing, there are additional costs such as workers' comp insurance, which have very high rates. So there was one client in a manufacturing facility, which was dealing with chemicals. The workers' comp itself was almost 20%, right? And so that adds a lot of burden. And so you need to add that visibility because you have to understand what supplier can bear in terms of the markups. And so without that visibility, it's hard to set meaningful rate, whether it's pay rate or bill rate for that particular type of category. And that's something that you should become more sophisticated about and understand.
Point. Moving on, reduce MSP and VMS fees. I'm sure there's some suppliers on the phone feel differently.
Well, suppliers probably will love that because many times suppliers are the ones that are basically taking on supporting the MSP VMS fees. So they're paying for essentially this continued workforce program, right? And the beneficiary often is the supplier if you reduce MSP VMS fees. And of course, MSPs are not going to want to hear this, and VMS is not, it's not really popular with any of them. But you've got to think about the fact that you have a bill rate, and typically, 2.5%, 3% is taken off the top, paid to pay for the program, right? Used to pay for the program by the suppliers. And now let's see more of a trend where clients are self-managing or they're paying for some of these fees directly. And so they are looking at, hey, how do we create more efficiency so we can basically pass on savings either to the supplier or taking those savings directly if the clients are paying for it. But I believe there's room here for savings. I believe that with the efficient use of technology, you can actually derive a lot of cost savings and automation and have better curation using AI to give you the heavy lifting from a curation perspective, automating supplier management. So I think there's room here. In fact, we're doing it for some of our clients where we're perhaps providing, 25, 30, 50% cost savings on MSP VMS. So I think there's room here and you can get a lot of that room from just implementing the right technology and helping get there.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the MSP that we first implemented in 1998 when I was 14 years old. We don't need that sort of solution anymore. Oftentimes, the service is more highly enabled by technology, and so the pricing models just deserve to be different based on what's happening.
All right, so this is going to be an interesting one. I already told you one of my favorites was the remote jobs that saves up to 50%. This is another one that can drive tremendous amount of cost savings, and yet it has to be implemented correctly, right? Strategically utilizing assignment conversions. What does that mean? Well, it means that let's say you have an assignment, typically you may have 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. After a certain period of time, and it depends, right? It really depends on the type of work that it is. For light industrial, it's a shorter period of time. For professional technical, it'll be a longer time. So 1 year, 2 years. You can essentially switch that worker and put it in your contract that we're going to convert these workers either to a full-time worker, right? So you bring them in house and you convert, and there may be after a period of time, there's no conversion fee. And the second is, or to a payrolling program. Both cases yield tremendous cost savings in years 2 or after 6 months, if it's light industrial, depending on the type of job it is. Right? And so this becomes a really great way to drive it, but it has to be done right. And I think is often overlooked.
And this is something that really critical to consider what the contract says. Always referring back to what the contract says. That's to allow these sorts of conversions. That if you don't have that within your current agreements, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy.
Absolutely. We can give you some of that language and help you figure out how to best implement that. All right.
Keep on going.
Process and compliance. Let's hit this category.
Bam.
Okay. First area. This is behind the scenes. Sometimes people don't even think about this, right? And you're so adamant about getting jobs posted. You're letting your business units basically post the jobs, and they're putting all these skills into the job description. And they sometimes don't even think about, hey, what is the right seniority level that I need for this particular job? And can they actually do with someone that isn't the most skilled for that particular job? So for example, if you need a senior Workday person, that can be $150 an hour. But if you can get by with somebody that is maybe not senior, has 3 to 5 years of experience, it could be $80 an hour, right? It just depends on the seniority level. So it's something to think about as a best practice internally. Who's doing the review of jobs? Who's asking those questions up front when you're doing an intent or approving a job of figuring out what is the right seniority level? What are the right skills for that particular job? And is it obvious in the job description that you may be open for different levels of seniority?
And we're burning through these because we want to make sure we get them all. But one thing I want to point out that is an observation is this notion of right skilling really is going to be thrown on its head over the next couple of years as generative AI code and low code solutions get to be more of a material solution and more accessible to people. What it takes to get something done is just going to, and a lot of resources higher will probably going to be heavily reliant on many types of technologies to present themselves and be able to accomplish things that maybe more senior people may not be able to do without technology. I think it's going to be really interesting to see.
So this one is about avoiding complex jobs with rare combination of skills. Usually people think about that as the purple squirrel, right? So I need somebody that has Java skills with some sort of other skill like DevOps. Again, rare, right? If you're doing that, if you're stacking skills that are not usually complementary, but are usually reserved for this person has this skill, this person has this skill, you're going to pay more, right? And this is an area where it's before you even publish a job, having a good process in place and finding ways to have standards so you can say, let's make sure that we're really vetting these jobs appropriately and not just putting something out there that is a purple squirrel that drives up costs unnecessarily. And so this is just, again, a way to double check and verify that.
And that takes a lot of institutional discipline to be able to go back and right skill and tell somebody, do you really need 3 years, or as opposed, do you really need that particular skill set? Because those things ramp up. I think there's data from TDX that shows how incremental additional skills cost per
Agreed.
requisition.
Agreed. Another process and compliance thing, and I think this yields some really great benefits, is many programs just don't even have a clue about what are their costs across the different suppliers, especially if they're using a bill rate program. But they can, even if pay rate programs, they can market programs, they can basically use audits as a way to get more data. And audits do not have to be for 100% of the population. They could be literally for 2%, 3%, 4%, 5% of the population. What you're saying is, give me the pay stubs of the workers and how you're paying them, right? And asking for that information, number one, ensures that they're on a W-2. But number two, it helps you understand what's the pay rate versus the bill rate, right? Giving that getting that visibility and insight really is telling. And you find patterns. Certain suppliers are charging 60, 70%. Certain other suppliers are charging 30, 40%. And it's interesting to just see what that looks like across the landscape. And then you can use that to make better decisions.
This was one of my favorite activities to do, working with clients, and also when I was a program manager myself. This audit every year was my Christmas time. Highly, highly recommend making this for your standard practice.
Yep.
Compliance audit.
And so on dovetailing on that similarly, right? Compliance audits are not just about the rates, but they're actually about how the individual is classified, the work is classified. And so you're looking to see, are they W-2? Are they 1099? Are they corp to corp? Are they actually following the guidelines in the contract? So if the supplier has said, hey, we're going to provide you with W-2 talent, and they're using subcontractors, that is going to present tremendous amount of risk to the organization, which you'll not even find out until potentially later. Right? And so when there's a lawsuit, that's later where you're basically now having to pay for statutory, you're having to deal with a lot of compliance risks that you weren't even aware were present. And so being proactive on these audits will help you ensure that you're not having to deal with those kind of extra costs longer term. Right. So this is a way to have both the pay rate audits as well as the compliance audits kind of be part of the same bucket and to yield good cost savings through processing compliance.
And I think having a compliance audit really requires a robust checklist strategy because it's easy to miss a lot. So make sure when you're going to be doing that you can consider those sorts of things. Moving on, hidden costs. We've got 15 minutes to get through the remaining. Let's make this happen.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's do it. So hidden costs. These are the costs that most people don't think about. And some do, some are fully aware of them, and some just haven't even thought about them. First of all, convert your SOWs to staff augmentation. What does that mean? Many of the SOWs are time and material that disguise as SOWs that are deliverable based, but they're not actual. And so this is an immediate area is that if you have some mechanism, process to really vet these SOWs to figure out, are they deliverables, true deliverables, where somebody's taking full responsibility for a complex project with many milestones and not just body shop, not just time and materials, not just putting 10 people on. That's an immediate way to get first of all, the contractual standardization across the entire program, the rates, the visibility, the spend, putting it into the BMS, leveraging extra talent pools and suppliers and so on, right? This immediately will drive a lot of cost savings.
Definitely one of the main ways to save a tremendous amount of money.
Another one, eliminate rogue spend. Again, many companies are not aware that they even have rogue spend, but if you have a standardized program that is not fully adopted by your organization, that means you have rogue spend. What does rogue spend do? It means that you have suppliers that are on different contracts oftentimes. It means that when you have a immediate need, because your program is not able to fulfill that need with the existing suppliers, you now have to add new suppliers in time crunch. And when you do add those suppliers, they're often coming in at higher rates and with different contract terms. All of that increases costs. The way to basically eliminate that is have a program that actually works, want to participate in, that really does drive standardization, and then basically allows you to get rid of that rogue.
Eliminate non-standard contract terms. This is also one of my favorite ones.
Yes. So what you'll find is that many programs do not standardize contract terms. So what they do is they'll have suppliers that have different language and different terms. So some will have different payment terms, 15 at 30, but 60. Some will have different markups. Some will have a variety of things, conversion terms. And what that does is, number one, it causes unfairness in the program. If some suppliers getting better terms, that means that they have more to invest in providing you talent as well. Whereas others are getting squeezed, tenure discounts and so on, then they're not going to be able to provide the best talent because they have to invest less or they have less to invest. And so this is a way that you can democratize the playing field and have everybody be on standardized terms. Should be, reasonable, not unreasonable, but this is a way to get cost savings.
That's a key element. Reasonable, not unreasonable.
Absolutely. Implement effective job and budget approval processes. Again, behind the scenes, you'll be surprised at how many times jobs don't even get vetted through an approval process.
No kidding.
There's no budgeting, there's no planning, and there's no approval process where somebody can say, for jobs over $25,000 to spend $100,000. I just want to double check, what is the budget for this job? And you should get approval, right? Doing this will help individuals that are asking for a new job to be open to be more thorough about justifying why they need that role. It's just important to do upfront, and the tools can help you do it, right? A VMS, a modern VMS will help make it very easy. We'll give you the full visibility. Then you can manage that spend. You can see by category. You can see by department. You can see by individual jobs themselves, just how you've allocated in terms of budget, how often you're going above budget. And that planning rigor will help you save costs long term.
Totally agree. This is one of the things that is often missed is the inefficiency in approval. Well, where after people who've been doing this for a while will see this is something that almost like saying water makes things wet. It's something that's obvious, but people don't often consider.
You got it. Yeah. And then, again, the reason you use a VMS is because you can actually automate a lot of things. One of the best things to automate is just the billing processes, right? You can generate automatic invoices. You can consolidate invoice to your suppliers. You can have one invoice that you're paying to an MSP, and then they can pay to your suppliers, or you can have a billing agent that can pay your supplier. Just that process, especially integrate with other applications that are internal financial applications, can save you a ton of money, can speed up the process. It can help you reconcile. It can help you get rid of any errors that happen. Humans are prone to errors, but machine integrates this all together, can still simplify the process, automate it, and ensure that you have less errors over a period of time.
Absolutely. Now on to my favorite topic, discounts. Discounts. One of the ways
We're down to the last section.
we're down to the last ones, and we're going to have time for a couple of questions and carry on some of the rate card discussion if we play this right. But I look at discounts. I always give a speech when I was doing CCP that discounts are like the tax code. It's not just about asking money, but it's about also incenting the right behaviors and right activities on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
So when you think about discounting, you have to look at it in the context of the interaction of these things with other elements. But it's to drive the right sort of behaviors that also translate into increased efficiencies and cost savings. So just that's one way to look at discounts. We're certainly not going to recommend that you want to necessarily hammer all the ones we're going to show today, and this is just a limited list. But just look at the interaction, the totality of what you have to offer.
Yeah, Brian, all I'll add to that is just because we're giving you 25 doesn't mean you should implement all 25.
Because you can doesn't mean you should.
Exactly. It's all about that, right? It's being strategic in your decisions about where to drive cost savings. It means you have many levers to choose from. And now you have to be conscious about what's the impact going to be on your business, as well as suppliers, as well as the talent that you're trying to attract. So the first discount is tender discounts. This is for, let's say, a certain period of time, a worker's been on assignment. You can ask for a discount from the supplier and put that in place. And depending on the program, depending on the level of markups that are already in place, the bill rate, if it's already aggressive, you may not get so much room for a tender discount. But there's some places where it makes a lot of sense, and where you can say, hey, after a certain period of time, you can discount by 1%, 2%, whatever it is, right? And so that's something you can do based on a time frame that the worker's on assignment. I've also seen it, instead of a fixed amount of time, I've also seen it as fixed number of hours. So 600 hours, 1,000 hours, et cetera.
I always recommend fixed amount of hours with a clear definition of what types of hours, non-contiguous hours.
You got it. Volume discount means really based on the amount of spend that a supplier is receiving, right? Now, if you move from a less is more to more is more approach, you should have a more democratized volume distribution. And yet you'll always find there's a bell curve, right? There are some suppliers that always outperform. And those suppliers that do, if they're achieving certain volume threshold, you can ask for a discount, right? And in that scenario where you can say, if you have surpassed a certain amount of volume of spend that you're receiving from our program, then we'd love for you to give us a credit back in terms of a discount. And again, that varies from program to program. Some programs can be really good, meaningful, cost savings this way. Others perhaps not being pulled on. And again, what you also want to be careful is you're implementing all of these. It's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? So buyers are going to be bleeding. You don't want that as well, right? So I always say you have all these levers, be thoughtful about which you want to implement. Not all makes sense at the same time.
This is one that's really common. Statistically speaking, volume discounts are really common in most programs, but often they're poorly implemented because the volume bands are often arbitrary. So having some science behind that really, really critical.
Yep.
And we can talk about how to do that at the round.
The overtime discount. This is one that companies don't think about often. So if a worker works overtime and they're eligible for overtime, they get time and a half. That's statutory. But what also ends up happening, especially in certain programs, is that the bill rate gets multiplied by time and a half. And guess what? The supplier is not working overtime, but yet the worker is, right? Their costs haven't gone up time and a half. So there is some way that you treat that overtime multiplier from a bill rate perspective. And to drive cost savings. And again, you have to be thoughtful about how much, but there is some potential for savings, and we can give you some guidance and help you get there. If you want to spend time talking to us about it, we can give you some guidance.
We were also able to provide some sample language that might be helpful.
Exactly. This is one that is early pay discount on invoices. Now, some programs have net 30, some programs have net 60. Look, if you're taking a long time to pay your invoices, already the suppliers squeezed, they need to get their money so they pay their contractors. They're funding the contractor, rates for a month or two already, right? That cash flow is being consumed. Then adding an early pay discount on top of it means they're squeezed a bit more. So you have to be thoughtful again. However, some suppliers will sign up for that. So if you make it an option and say, we're going to basically give you the option of taking this money earlier, maybe in net 5 instead of net 30, net 45, net 60, some suppliers really need that or want that because it saves them cash flow perspective. So if you make it optional, you can drive cost savings there.
This is often one of my favorite ones because in real dollar terms, the return on the investment is just insane. There are early payment discount calculators available. Feel free to reach out to me if you want a copy of one of them, but they really do demonstrate, sometimes almost like an return, in the hundreds of percentages for the right, well negotiated one where everybody benefits. Everybody can benefit from that. Sunil, you freeze. I see a little symbol there next to you.
All right. I think I'm back.
There you go. You're back. There you are. Okay. Awesome. Longer payment term, ironically.
Exactly. And many of these tie together is really being, again, mindful about your program, your payment terms across your suppliers. First of all, it'd be a good idea to standardize it. You don't want different payment. It's a nightmare for finance teams to be able to manage the different payment terms. And then second of all, once you do standardize it, you could extend a little bit more to give you access to more cash flow for your program so that you can reinvest that into other areas. So that is another way to get some cost savings.
And this is often one that is certainly popular with CFOs, but less popular with staffing suppliers sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely something to consider. I can't believe it, but we got through all the major ideas, but I want to go through some final housekeeping before we open up the kind of continue with probably going to be the rate card discussion at the roundtables, because that was the one that everyone was interested in. But if you're interested in downloading all of these hacks with associated descriptions, go ahead and scan that little symbol there. If you don't have time while I'm racing through these slides to get to the end, it'll be available via download on the download and as well as on the replay. So please take a moment to go ahead and scan that little symbol there, enter your information, and you'll be giving a download. Is that how it works? You'll get a download link afterwards?
Absolutely. So there's a
Fantastic.
landing page, provide some information and they can download the ebook. It's very easy.
Very, very straightforward. Looking forward to it. And I can tell you, really well done. It looks great, and it's got a lot of great data. I hope everyone will take advantage of it.
Yep. And
That brings it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Sunil.
another thing I just want to highlight is that Bryan and I are both here to support you in your cost savings initiatives. If you
100%.
have questions, want to have conversations, we're here to support you, right? We know that some of these, there's a lot to digest, and some of these you have to be conscious and mindful about what you want to implement, what the impact is going to be, and just thinking through it. Sometimes there's a lot of different approaches. We're happy to walk you through it. This is an area we're passionate about, and we'd love to be able to support it if required.
That is 100% accurate. Thank you for that. Your success is our success. And we encourage you to stick around for the roundtable sessions. We're going to try and get through some of these final housekeeping. We hope we'll see you there. But I want to say thank you to the Prosperix team for an amazing presentation. Sunil, as always, you are so smooth and you make everything sound so easy. It's kind of embarrassing. We're going to stick around for questions afterward, but we also hope that you'll join us at the roundtable session. We're going to go ahead and do that. Join us at roundtables. Hope to join us there. There's going to be Sunil and myself, and then general discussion. We hope that you will, if you want to learn, scan those for our LinkedIn invites. If you're not connected to us on LinkedIn, well, do so. It's all of our contact details for both Sunil and myself. We are obsessed surveying and making sure we have continuous improvement. So to that end, we hope you'll leave us a survey and give us your honest feedback. What you like, what you didn't like, what we can do better, what you'd like to see more of. We hope that you will also join us again on the 27th for our debunking myths of talent marketplaces. And that's also the link where you can download that. And again, we're going to continue discussions on the roundtable. So we have a couple of minutes, Sunil. One of the things that we want to lead into, and it was a huge topic of conversation, was rate cards and the conversation around rate cards. So while we have 1 minute left, get your general impression about some rate card practices that maybe we didn't reference. And then we'll take that conversation into the roundtables when we bring this all to a close. So tell me, when it comes to rate card, if you looked at the back and forth, it was a lot of really diverse perspectives. People said it was not good. Other people say that they have to do it. What are your general impressions on some best practice? Maybe we didn't.
I think that you absolutely have to do it. Because at the end of the day, you have to know, are you paying too much or too little? Right. That's really what this comes down to. And once you've done the vetting of all the different jobs, and by the way, your jobs may be very different than what's in the market. And so kind of that in mind, right? But if you've done that analysis and you have the right job descriptions and you started mapping it, then at least it gives you peace of mind and you can go back to your CFOs and your finance part of the organization, the procurement teams, and say, look, we've done our due diligence. This is what the standard rates are. If suppliers come to you and say, hey, we need more rates, you can really have a detailed conversation about it. Without that data, you really don't know where to start, right? And so that's why it's important. It's necessary. Doesn't, always help. Is it easy to do? It's not easy to do at all. And yet it's necessary.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think it needs to be well done and well thought out with the right level of external considerations and internal ones. I think that's fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and not say goodbye because hopefully everyone will join us at the roundtables. We'll say thanks again to Sunil and thank you to Prosperix team for putting together just a phenomenal presentation and a phenomenal ebook. So much resources, probably, frankly, the most free resources I've ever seen available in a long, long time. So good stuff. We'll hope to see you at the roundtables. Join us then. And again, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Kenna, for moderating the insanity and doing such an amazing job. Couldn't do without you. And we'll see you at the roundtables.
See you soon. Thanks, Bryan. Appreciate you hosting.
Absolutely.